been amazing. But no, thank you for joining us here.
Yeah,
So I guess we'll start, so everyone can get to know you. And if anyone has any questions, just drop them in the little question thing on the bottom, and
ah,
we'll
cool.
read them here.
Awesome.
So, like when obviously you've been climbing for a while. When did you start climbing and really getting into it?
Well, I started climbing when I was about 15. My parents sent me on an Outward Bound course. I don't know if you've ever heard of Outward Bound. It's sort of an outdoor program for kids. And they sent me on an alpine mountaineering course. And that's where I first started rock climbing. And I absolutely fell in love with climbing, much to my parents' horror. So I really started when I was 15. I had a really bad injury when I was a kid, and I couldn't do much for a couple years. Then I got kind of back into climbing in college, and in the last 10 years, I've been a full-time professional climber. Um,
Nice.
yeah,
Did you is there what did you start climbing in a particular type of climbing and
yeah,
then got into what you're doing now?
yeah. I actually started climbing totally different style, more like you're seeing in the Olympics right now. I was
Hmm.
indoor climbing, I was sport climbing. That's where you're using those micro holds. I climbed outdoors quite a bit, sport climbing. I also bouldered a lot, which is, climbing, but without ropes, just smaller problems. I climbed big walls, and my biggest obsession was ice climbing. I ice
Hmm.
climbed a lot. That was really my number one style. But one winter, and you might have seen this, one winter I had a really bad injury. My forearms actually started hurting so badly that I couldn't hold on to my ice tools.
Mm.
So I started training more and more, thinking I was weak. And it
Yeah.
turned out that I developed something called chronic exertional compartment syndrome, which is it means there's so much pressure in the muscle compartments that it causes nerve damage and muscle damage. And so I saw a number of surgeons, and they told me I had to quit climbing entirely. And
Oh.
so I quit climbing. And then I was still going through my books, and I was like, maybe there's just something I could still do. And I saw pictures from Vidavoo, Wyoming, where I am right now, actually. It's a really beautiful place. And there'd been a style developed here, or lots of people climb the style here, called offwidth, which means it's bigger than your fist. It's where you start stacking body parts when you climb. So, like hand stacks, hand fist stacks, double fist stacks. And I was like, well, I think I can do that because it doesn't involve crimping. And climbing upside down, same thing. I was like, if I don't crimp anymore, I'm sure I can, keep climbing. So I drove up to Vidavoo. I was in graduate school, and I climbed here one day upside down and quit my job, quit school, and started climbing absolutely full time. And I've been climbing, obsessively 200 days a year ever since. I
Are
also
you healed? Like, can't, I mean, if you wanted to crimp, I mean, you can do it now, I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
it's not healed. I did a lot of damage already,
Mm.
because basically it cut off the oxygen in my arms. So
Mm.
I have a harder time holding pens is hard for me. Holding small cams even can be hard for me, some of the smaller climbing gear.
Hmm.
Um, but I've kind of worked ways around it.
Wow.
As long as I'm careful, I can still do some of those climbs, but not very many days in a row. Usually 1 or 2
Got
days in
it.
a row, and then I rest for a week. The
Yeah.
problem is I put muscle mass on very quickly. It's genetic apparently, and that's why the muscle sheath can't expand as quickly as I can put on muscle, which is cool, but it's a problem too.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so I still do a little bit of that other styles, but mainly still the off-width style. It's my all-time favorite. I love it.
Well, what you just told us takes what we've seen up 10 notches, 'cause now it just seems like, okay, well, you had it this and now you actually made it harder and you're
Yes.
still doing this amazing stuff. Um, so we read that, you received this Golden Piton Award in 2009.
Yeah.
Was that for the route Gabriel? Or was that
Yeah.
for a few routes?
That was for the route Gabriel. And that was really funny because that was before I was a professional climber. And I'd heard there was a route in Zion that nobody could do. And people had been working on it for 10 years.
Hmm.
And I went to with my climbing partner at the time to try it, and he was the one who was really working on it, and he couldn't do it, and I couldn't at the time.
Yeah.
I moved to Alaska, and I was working in Alaska, but I was just dreaming of finishing this route. So I came back down to Utah, and my one goal was to complete that route. So I did the first ascent of it. And at the time, I didn't really know what I had done. I was like, wow, it was really hard. You know, it was like
Yeah.
a 70-foot inverted style off width roof. And I remember I came home at Christmas and I get this weird email and they're like, yeah, you just, won the Golden Piton. And I was like, I didn't have any idea what that even was. I was like, I don't know what this is. And then I realized, what it was. It was for
Yeah.
establishing the most significant new traditional style climb in the world in that year. So yeah, I was really super excited about it. And that really was a turning point. That's actually when I became a sponsored climber and
Hmm.
then a professional climber. And it happened overnight. Like I wasn't expecting it. I was working in Alaska, I work in the Bering Sea. And suddenly I was like, it was amazing on one hand, and there was a lot of pressure on the other, because
Yeah.
suddenly I was like in the spotlight. Nobody knew who I was. I was just climbing, doing my thing, and then suddenly I was like in the spotlight. So, which was really cool. In some ways it was a plus because the style I do off with wasn't popular at all 10 years
Hmm.
ago. And very few women climbed off with, almost none. And no woman had ever established that hard of an off with. That one, was 513. So it was the hardest route in
Yeah.
the world, the hardest off with in the world at that time. And it really gave me an opportunity to introduce the world to a more artistic side of off with climbing, because I'm much
Hmm.
littler than the men who established the style. So I had to use a lot more technique. And I
Hmm.
really refined the technique and really tried to show the world that it was a very artistic style of climbing. And now it's
Yeah.
quite popular. 10 years later, I never expected that would happen. But
Yeah.
I'm
And
happy.
when when you have these routes, when you've done now, setting up, Gabriel, Forever War, Lucille, these other routes, when you're looking at something for the first time, especially it's a bare slate, no one's done it before, how do you go about planning that route?
Oh, that's such a good question. Because what I do is I drive around Utah mainly, and I have a spotting scope and binoculars, and I just look at walls and I hike for hours and hours. And I have a modified lifted truck specifically so I can
Yeah.
drive out anywhere I want to. And I
Yeah.
just look up and I look for lines. So the first thing I do is I look for lines that are aesthetically really spectacular. I have a very particular style. I like routes with zigzags. I like routes that are very dramatic looking. And then what I'll do is I'll hike out to the base of them and I'll look up and I'll see if they look possible. So
Hmm.
my process is initially just searching all over, driving for 4 or 5 hours and looking for something that just captivates me. And then after that, I get super obsessed and I go home and I obsess about it and I take photos and I get my partners and we just go in and we try. We just get off the ground and see what happens. Sometimes we can't move at all. Sometimes
Hmm.
it will take, a day, and sometimes it'll end up taking a couple of years to finish a route. So,
Do the zigzags and the more drastic lines, are they more beneficial for you?
well, I think, just the more dramatic and the zigzags, I need a lot of, the zigzags are more challenging physically. They require some really weird maneuvering. And I like
Hmm.
routes that require something new. Like I need for the routes to be exciting. I need there
Yeah.
to be something different. So, what's amazing with this style is I've been doing this for, this style for 10 years. And I keep thinking, that's it. There's nothing more. There's nothing more. And every route I find, there's like new way of refining techniques, a new way of climbing them. So I'm just always looking for something different. I'm always looking for something magnificent, something that will, consume me.
obviously, this is a sport that evolves real time as you're doing it. While you're
Yeah.
doing these routes and planning and going up, how much changes as you're in the middle of it?
You mean like, well, as far as my attitude toward the climber, sort of physically. I mean, what happens is it's interesting because I'll look up and what I think looks like how I'm going to do it. Often it is. Often I'll look up and I'll be like, okay, this is the style, I'll climb this. But sometimes I'll get partway up a route, and that could be anywhere from 100, 200, 300, 400 feet, and realize that there's something that I cannot get around,
Yeah.
or something that's absolutely the objective hazard level is too high. There's rock
Hmm.
fall,
Yeah.
or this, something that I'm climbing, it turns out that is detached somehow. Um, so, so things, yeah, things can come up. I mean, I'll have a plan to be like, I'm going to climb this 400 feet, get to the top, and walk away. It never, never really works out like that. There's always things I'm not
Yeah.
expecting. Often what I'll think looks like a certain size when I get to it will be dramatically different size than I expected too. Um, so there's always surprises,
Mm.
and I love that. I love the adventure. I love going where no one else has gone before, and I love that things happen up there. Some things are great, often things are not great, but that you just have to deal with them as they happen.
Well, one thing and I know we've already had that question like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
What's your favorite, if you had to pick one, what has been your favorite climb or your favorite peak that
Um,
you've done?
well, Gabriel was obviously very special to me, because it was the first of that style. I got to develop the techniques for it, which was really an incredible experience because those techniques hadn't been developed yet. Nobody had actually
Hmm.
climbed anything like that. So I was
Hmm.
the first person to create the techniques necessary to complete the route. And
Hmm.
so that was really special to me. So that was one of my all-time favorites. I mean, I have so many routes I love so much, but I think that one.
Now, Gabriel, since you did that, and obviously that's very near and dear to your heart,
Yeah.
how many times have you climbed it?
Oh, I've climbed it a couple. I've
Okay.
I've actually I've climbed it a few, but I haven't been back in 10 years now.
Oh, okay.
It's funny. I'd kind of love to go back to it now, 10 years later. It was one
Yeah.
of my earlier.
So we were talking a little bit about some of your summits and stuff like that
Yeah.
right before you got cut off. So you said that you got very emotional sometimes when you get to the summit, that you just kind of
Sometimes
cried.
I do. Sometimes it'll be something I've dreamt of climbing for so long, and I get to the top and I just start crying. It's just so emotional. And then it's always funny because I'll just start crying and I'll be so happy. And then within half an hour, all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, but now what? Now what do I do? So it's always this elation followed by a little bit of letdown because I'm like, now what? I have these projects, I dream of them, and suddenly when I'm done, I'm a little lost for a while. So
Yeah.
I'm very project and goal oriented. I have to have something that I'm dreaming about, and if I don't, I get a little panicky.
Are these climbs usually like a 1 day thing, or do you think, hey, you know what, I'm gonna go to the summit, I'm gonna camp out, and then we're gonna come back down the next day, that kind of thing?
That's a good question. Some of them are short. Some of them will be 50 feet tall. Some of them are 100 feet tall. It could take me months sometimes to complete a 50-foot route. If it's something that's very challenging, I could be
Hmm.
working on the most difficult part of it for months at a time. It
Yeah.
usually doesn't take me more than 8 or 12 attempts on a climb, generally, to finish them.
Hmm.
But sometimes they'll take months, and I won't be able to finish. It'll get too cold or too hot, and I'll have to go back the next season. And I love routes like that because I obsess
Hmm.
about them all winter or all summer, and then I get to them. I'm super excited.
So you'll have routes that you'll go up 50% and then you have to go back down because you just can't
Yeah,
keep.
yeah.
Oh gosh, that's
Sometimes I'll
frustrating.
get, I'll look at the route, and part of it'll be easy. And I'll get part to what we call the crux, which is, the part that's the most difficult technically.
Hmm.
And I won't be able to do it. Sometimes
Oh.
it'll take, I'll have to get off the route and go back. I live in Montana. I'll have to go home and train particularly for it. I have a route I'm working on right now, that requires a movement that's so hard on my shoulder that I've had to, train for a few months just to build up the shoulder mobility and strength that I don't dislocate my shoulder on it. Um,
Oh man.
so yeah, that route is spectacular, but I was too worried about dislocating my shoulder. So I had to train for
And do
that.
you take notes? Like if you're, let's just say you're up there, you're trying to do this maneuver with your shoulder, you
Yeah.
can't do it. I mean, is someone doing a drone? Are you sketching? Like, are you just taking a mental note?
Mental notes, sometimes I'll have people take some cell phone footage,
Yeah.
or some photos just so I can, kind of memorize the movement.
Yeah.
And then I'll also take some notes on it. And so that over the winter, I can kind of visualize what I need to do. I think visualizing the movement helps me a lot. Um, so yeah, I do get people sometimes just with a cell phone or a GoPro or something just to film it so I can obsess about it for months at a time.
That's amazing. I mean, listen, it's no different than a painter or a sculptor or someone who's
Right.
working on something. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
really, a lot of people, I think, who are just used to, rock climbing gyms. Okay, you go up, you go down, you go up and down, and you're
Exactly.
really, it's a living, breathing organism that you're a part of, that's
Exactly.
why, I mean, look, you're doing things that I will physically never do in my lifetime for a fear of heights and a fear of claustrophobia tight spaces. So take away the inability to do it, but so that's why whenever I message you, I've said it's like a superhero, because it's like you're doing something that is be just like when you go see Circus Soleil or something, it's just so few people, and it's so technical. And whenever I see the photos, yeah, it's a beautiful sunset or whatever, but I'm looking more at, your knees are wedged in there, like how are you holding up your
Yeah.
body? you know so it's just amazing. um as I know you're in Moab and you've traveled, quite a bit. So
Yeah.
there was on the news, I don't know exactly when this was, that there was some climbers who had, placed a bolt through some indigenous,
Yeah.
art. Have you come across that? And what's your thought about that? Is that
Yes.
something that they could have avoided, or?
I have come across cases like that. Often hopefully most often the case is, as in that particular case, was that the person didn't know what they were looking at. They
Hmm.
didn't realize it was actually a panel of petroglyphs. They thought it was graffiti.
Hmm.
So that was very unfortunate. But I think that what we really can do to prevent that in the future is more education, just making people more aware of what they see. Even in Indian Creek when they're climbing, for people to be more aware of where there are petroglyphs, how we protect them. So right now, the Access Fund, which is an organization that does a lot of legal work for protecting areas for people to climb, they're very involved in that. Um, so yeah, I think the question now is going to be coming up with ways of educating people so that they know not to do that. Because again, generally it's just that people don't know. There
Yeah.
are cases of vandalism, which is horrendous, obviously, um,
Yeah.
but we can't really do much about that. Um,
Yeah.
but we could
Now,
educate people.
have you come across hieroglyphs? Have you actually seen them, and like
The
while you're climbing?
petroglyphs? Oh
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
petroglyphs. Sorry.
Yeah, they're everywhere in Indian Creek and Moab area. I mean, there's huge walls of them, huge panels of them. And if you've been climbing there a long time, you know not to climb them. They're very
Yeah.
delicate. And
Yeah.
you know not to climb near them.
Yeah.
There are routes that are within the vicinity of them, but you should just never climb anything that is close enough that you could step on it or you could touch it or that it would
Yeah.
increase the impact in
Yeah.
that location.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, I've found many.
I'm sure when you're climbing and you see it, I mean, I'm sure, as an appreciation, you must like sit back and be like, wow, like
Oh, they're
it's like
amazing.
like a paleontologist, like, man,
Oh
I'm
yeah,
right in front of
they're
this.
they're so cool. I mean, I found pottery shards, I found petroglyphs, I found pictographs. So yeah, pieces of pottery are amazing, and it's just I think educating climbers and educating other user groups that any, anything you find like that, you just don't touch it and you leave it.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's, hopefully that'll happen more. We'll find ways to
Yeah.
make that.
Yeah, no, no, that's very cool. So Olympics right now, I have
Yeah.
here my, the client, the speed climbing and this has made its first official Olympic debut. They're actually
Yeah.
giving medals out. How do you feel about that? And do you think that's going to increase popularity of climbing?
Yeah. You know what? I don't really know. I'm really excited about it. I think it's really cool. I've been watching
Hmm.
it. I think it's really amazing. I think it'll obviously make climbing much more popular, at least
Hmm.
climbing gyms, indoor climbing. And with that, there'll be changes that need to be made. There'll have to be more emphasis on safely going from indoor climbing to outdoor climbing because it's
Hmm.
very different. I don't think it'll affect my style of climbing very much,
Hmm.
because what I do and is considered traditional style climbing, where we're going outside, we're placing our own gear. There
Hmm.
aren't bolts that you can fall on, so it's almost making climbing sort of distinguishing different types of climbing. So it would be like comparing downhill skiing to snowboarding. Um,
Yeah.
it's all overall in a similar kind of genre, but breaking up into these different subsets.
Yeah.
But yeah, Olympic
Have you
climbing.
seen, I know you do a lot of clinics and camps and stuff,
Yeah.
I've seen online. Do you see an increase in popularity in outdoor climbing, especially?
Yeah, you know what? I've seen a lot of it's been a lot more popular since our lockdown and quarantines. I think everybody
Hmm.
went got so crazy during quarantine and lockdown. Everyone was like, as soon as I'm done, I'm going to go learn how to climb. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's become more popular since then. And I'd imagine that the Olympics will make it even more popular, which
That's
is
awesome.
great. It's an exciting sport. I'm happy to have the rest of the world get to be part of it.
And obviously with popularity, at Hook 360, we've been members of 1% for the Planet since
Yeah,
we've joined, founded. We do everything in recycled paper and all that stuff. So
yeah.
conservation is a very big important to what we do. What is your thoughts of conservation and climbing and that kind of thing? Obviously, we've heard horror stories that on Mount
Yeah.
Everest there's a gazillion pounds of garbage and air tanks and stuff. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, and again, it's like what you were saying before with the increasing popularity of climbing. Obviously, there'll have to be more attention to the conservation. There'll have to be more attention to cleaning up crags and to overuse of areas. And that'll be very interesting to see what happens, especially in an area like Indian Creek that's got very heavy use. There could be thousands of climbers there at any time.
Hmm.
So I know there's a lot going on right now where people are trying to develop scenarios for future impact, and to determine the best ways to handle the increasing load on the landscape. Uh,
Hmm.
but we'll see. I mean, that's going to be an interesting question. We're at a point now where it's going to be crucial to start figuring out how to handle that increasing popularity of the sport and
So
how it affects the landscape.
you seem when you climb, obviously, you seem minimal, meaning, just you have the gear that you need to do to get the job
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
From what I've seen your photos. But when you go, is as someone who's not, very well versed in it, is the only thing that you're leaving behind those bolts and anchors that you've kind of preset for the course, and that's it?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And there's a lot of discussion about that as well, because when you're establishing a new route, you climb using the gear that we have, which all gets
Hmm.
removed.
Hmm.
But when you get to the end of what we call a pitch, which is a rope length, you have to put in an anchor in order for future parties to climb it and in order
Hmm.
to get off the climb. And so we put in anchors. It depends on the rock type. I climb, predominantly on sandstone.
Hmm.
So we use bolts and hangers. I use stainless steel bolts and hangers. They're different sizes according to how soft the rock is or how hard the rock is. So yeah, there is some controversy about that as well, obviously, because we are leaving a permanent anchor in the rock.
Hmm.
On my for myself, I like to put in the absolute best anchor I can so that it'll, stand the test of time and will be the safest anchor possible.
Hmm.
So again, people do have questions about us leaving anchors in the rock. But again, if you're careful about what you're doing, the idea is to make it safe for people in the future. It's
Yeah.
minimizing damage, and it's keeping it safe for future parties, which is extremely important to me.
Hmm.
So when I put in an anchor, I try to put in the absolute best anchor I can to encourage other people to climb my routes and to climb them safely.
As a pro climber, I'm sure there's places all around the world that you haven't been to personally, but do you consult? Do people hit you up and like, hey, can you? We're planning this route. Can you give us some insight and expertise?
They do, and
That's
it's one of
cool.
my favorite things is people from all over the world will send me photos of routes they're working on, and they'll send me videos of them working on it, and they'll say, "What's your
Hmm.
advice here? What do I need to do to climb this? What technique do I need to do to climb this?" So
That's
it's
awesome.
really fun. I love that, and they'll send me photos from everywhere in the world saying, "Come climb this," or "How do I climb this?" So that's really cool. It's really fun.
That's awesome. Is there a place that you've been dying to go, you just haven't been able to make it out yet, that you really want to
Yeah,
explore?
I'm actually really eager to get to Europe. I climbed a bit in the Czech Republic,
Hmm.
but I've been meaning to go back for a long time. I really want to climb in France quite a bit. So I have particular routes I do want to get to, but yeah, Europe. Other than that, for my style of climbing, I'm in the best part of the world.
Yeah.
So, I keep saying, I'm going to leave, I'm going to get out of Utah. And then I'm like, but after I do one more route, one more route,
Yeah.
one more route. Now years go by and I love it there so much. It's just hard to make myself go anywhere else.
How many? I know. I think I read somewhere in one of the things online that you've done like 80 first ascents. Um, but do you keep I've recently got into scuba
Yeah.
diving, so I've been logging all the dives and stuff. Do you keep like track of every single one that you do?
I don't. And at this point, I've probably
Okay,
put up more like probably about 300.
got it.
And I don't, a lot of them I do log and some of them I just don't. Some of them, I just disappear into oblivion somewhere. A lot of
Yeah.
them I do, I do log. And this last spring, I established quite a few routes. I did some spectacular routes with my climbing partner, G, who is out here
Mhm.
somewhere. Um, So I also established quite a few routes that were very important to me at the end of the season with another partner of mine, Devin, because we were able to go to the summit of some of the formations in Indian Creek, which is very rare. There's a very
Nice.
famous buttress called the Super Crack Buttress, and we were able to establish a route to the rim. And that
Hmm.
probably
Hmm.
hasn't been done in 20 or 30 years. So that was really
That's
exciting.
awesome. And I'm
Yeah.
sure when you guys do establish those routes and you see on Instagram or online other people utilizing your route, I'm sure it just, warms
Yes.
your heart a little bit that
It
they're
does. It's
experiencing the
really
same thing.
exciting. Yeah. I love it when people
Is
go do them.
when you're climbing, we've seen pictures and video and stuff, all these people, rock climbers, doing the camping on the rock face, and they're, X amount of feet up, and it's just like, how can you even, have you done that? And what's that
I have.
experience like camping right on it?
It's really crazy. It's so funny because people ask me about it all the time. But yeah, I've
Yeah.
done that. I have camped on what we call a portaledge, which is like a ledge that you set up yourself partway up a route. And yeah, I've slept up on ledges, especially in Zion, where I've done some of the big walls. It's fun. It's really unnerving at first, but it's funny because I also work in the Bering Sea, and it's sort of like being on a boat. Everything's kind of wobbling around a little, but it's
That's
really
awesome.
exciting. It sounds scarier than it really is. It's actually not that
Well, I
bad.
think I think the benefit of it is obviously for you, you're halfway up, you're resting,
Exactly.
you're really taking in what you just did. And I'm
Yeah.
sure the view in the morning is just
Oh,
amazing, and the
it's
stars at
it's
night.
spectacular. Waking up on a wall like that is absolutely spectacular. It's just, uh, it's amazing.
That's that's awesome. So what's if you had to pick one, we had this question come up twice actually yesterday when we were collecting questions. So what's your go-to climb day, mid climb snack that you're doing just to keep the energy going?
So funny because it's such a good question. I ask myself that all the time. I mean, the nutrition with climbing is really important and it's really
Yeah.
difficult. I work with a nutritionist, and then every once in a while I completely forget everything she said to me and I fall back to eating gummy bears and donuts and Snickers. And then I wonder why I'm not climbing that well. So what I've been doing mainly during the day is apples, avocados, because it's a really healthy fat, and cheese, and sometimes just turkey. I try to eat actual food. Like as soon as you start just eating tons of trail mix, you're not actually
Yeah.
going to be that healthy. You're like, I'm always going for all the chocolate in it. It's like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
gummy bears I love too. But for the most
Yeah.
part, right now, I'm trying to eat real foods. I try to eat
Yeah.
more in the morning so that I don't have to eat as much during the day. I
Hmm.
drink a lot of water and energy drinks during the day. Fizz Advantage makes a fantastic, it's like a drink that's kind of an energy performance drink, which I absolutely
Hmm.
love. Um, so yeah, food during the day is really hard, especially because I'm off with climbing, which means I'm going to be upside down. So,
Yeah.
I could be puking. So yeah, apples, cheese, bagels, avocados. I don't have a very strict diet, but I do,
Yeah.
try to eat actual food,
Yeah.
90% of the time.
And what and in turn with that, anyway, what's your work? When you're not climbing, obviously you're climbing 200 days a year, but what's your workout? Do you do like a 5-day workout plan or that kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. When I'm not climbing, when I'm in my off season, I always take 2 months off in the winter to recover and rebuild because as I'm climbing, you'd think you'd get fitter, but you actually start overdeveloping in some ways, getting weaker in others, and actually kind of with my style, like damaging your body to a point that
Hmm.
I end up in physical therapy every winter. So I do
Hmm.
take 2 to 3 months off every winter and I train 5 to 6, probably 6 or 7 days a week, actually. I
That's
do
awesome.
take kind of a rest day, and sort of active rest days where I'm still hiking.
Hmm.
But during that time, I strength train 3 days a week. I do Pilates anywhere from 3 to 5 days a week. I do a core workout 5 days a week, cardio
Hmm.
6 days a week. So yeah, it'll be 4 to 6 hours of training a day,
And I'm
for
sure some serious stretching and flexibility
yeah,
training.
and a lot of stretching. I cross train doing aerial silks, so it is very like
Hmm.
Cirque du Soleil.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I also ice fish.
Okay.
That's good for the patients.
Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, so a lot of training, and I love
That's
training.
a,
So
that's awesome. Now, I mean, so there was some comments yesterday, and about particularly about training, but do you feel that your legs, when you're climbing that much, are your legs getting more developed, or is it truly
I
from
do feel,
seems more upper
with
body?
it is. With my style of climbing, generally climbing would be more upper body. With my style of climbing, there's a lot of emphasis on lower body. So I
Hmm.
do work on upper body quite a bit. But
Hmm.
for me, the most important is hip stability and shoulder stability because with this style, your hips are in an absolutely horrendous position and
Yeah,
it can be really painful and can do a lot of damage. So in
yeah.
that off season, I do another program where I do a hip stability program. It's about an hour long. I do that twice a week, and I do a shoulder stabilizer specific workout twice a week too. For the hip stabilizers, I'm generally using a TRX,
Hmm.
which is fantastic for cross training.
Yeah.
Um, and stabilizers, I have various different programs for training. But so I do a lot of lower body training because I need that power.
Hmm.
Um, so, which is unusual. My style does require a lot of lower body power.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you could tell. And I mean, as you're inching up and what are those bars I saw you in a couple posts that you're turning them to spread them out to
Oh
for
yeah,
both
it's called a big bro, and it's
big
it's
bro.
a type of climbing gear. It's a type of pro. So I
Hmm.
place that as I climb, and
Okay.
ostensibly it's going to hold me if I fall.
Gotcha.
But it's one of my favorite pieces of gear. It was created by my mentor, Craig Lubin.
Oh
Um,
wow.
he was the one who actually invented the Big Bro as his PhD. I believe it was his master's or his PhD project. And they're not used a lot, but I absolutely love them. I've been using them forever. I think they're a fantastic piece of gear. They're a little tricky to use at first, and
Yeah.
people think they're hard to put them in the rock, but it takes me about 12 seconds, and I've taken 40, 50-foot falls on them, and here I am.
Woo.
So they work.
Now, in one of the things I did read that you did a climb and you had fallen, and then you got injured in that climb. What's, knock on wood, I hope you never experience any injuries in a climbing, but obviously, it comes with the territory of that. But what's kind of the most hair-raising incident you've had of a, mid climb?
Well, let's see. Also, I noticed one person asked me if I was training with Dylan. Yes, I trained with Dylan at the Alpine Peak in Missoula, Montana. It's called Peak Fitness. That's where I train with a great guy named Dylan. So yes, I've had a number of horrible injuries. I think, the worst I had was a little odd. I was climbing and I had a foot hooked over my head. And I was pulling a rock down. It was a route I was establishing, so there was still loose rock. And I pulled the rock and it hit me hard in the chest and flipped me upside down. It twisted my foot got stuck. And so it twisted my back really hard. And I ruptured 5 discs in my back just instantaneously. I didn't know what was wrong, but when I got down, I knew something was really pretty wrong. I was really sick. I knew something was wrong with my back, but I wasn't sure what. So I tried to keep climbing for another month, actually. And then I did get to a point where I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand.
Oh, man.
That rehab, I went back, and it took me about 10 months to recover. We had a couple options, and one was to have surgery to just, fuse those discs. But they said I would never climb at the level I had been before. I wouldn't have the mobility I needed to climb my style. So they gave me the option. They said you could do the surgery and you'll be back, to yourself in 4 to 6 weeks. Or you could choose to do extensive physical therapy and you'll be back climbing in, 10 to 12 months. So that was a hard decision. I went with the 10 month to 12 month option. I couldn't walk for 4.
Wow.
Totally immobilized. But I had an incredible team of physical therapists, surgeons, and trainers. And it was a tough time, but
yeah, I'm sure.
10 months later, I went back, I got on the route that I'd fallen on and completed the project. So.
And I'm sure that day was emotional and felt great when you got to the end of it.
Oh yeah. When I completed that route, it was a 400-foot route. When I got to the top of it, I just started crying. It was really emotional. It was like an entire year had gone by, but it felt like an instant. And completing that route was one of the most meaningful experiences I'd had, because going through that recovery was brutal, just, physically and mentally very challenging.
So for someone who wants to get into your style, offwidth, what is your recommendation? Obviously, I would say, go to one of her camps. I mean, I'm sure that's a good start, but what's your recommendation?
That's the way to start, obviously, taking one of my clinics. There are a couple different options. And yes, I do teach offwidth clinics with my climbing partner, Gisele. And we do actually have one October 8th through 10. We have 4 spaces left in that one.
Nice.
And we do a comprehensive introduction to offwidth climbing. It's 3 days in Indian Creek. If you're already a climber, that's a fantastic way to get into it, is to do, clinics. The other best way to do it is to find a mentor. Get to Moab or climb in Yosemite, and find partners who have more experience and can really mentor you as a climber. Obviously, fitness is important. So building up that fitness will, ultimately be tremendously helpful. But for me, it was finding a mentor, which I did.
Hmm.
And I climbed with a few of these guys for years. I learned everything I knew from this one little crew of of guys. Um, so that's also, I think that's really the best way to become an off-width climber. Building up that fitness for one, getting out and climbing as much as possible, and finding a way to do it safely, whether that's hiring a private guide, which you can do, also fantastic. I did that initially as an ice climber. And then finding partners who you feel very confident and safe with. Again,
Yes.
safety is really the most important, because, from my experience, where I didn't take that very seriously, I take it much more seriously now,
Yeah.
after
Do
a few
do you
accidents.
guys do camp? Is it once a month or so? Someone had said in one of the comments yesterday on one of the questions,
Yeah,
is there going to be one? Can I book? I'm in Moab next
yeah.
June or July. Is there one then?
Well, yeah, we actually do one every fall and one every spring. We
Okay.
might start adding another. But this fall, we're doing one October 8th, 9th, and 10th. Again, it's
Hmm.
3 days. It's in Indian Creek. We keep it to a pretty small group, and it's a lot of fun. We have 4 expert instructors. We climb a lot, a lot. So,
Yeah.
you want to go into it being physically fit, because we do up to 25 pitches, which means
Wow.
25 different climbs in 3 days. And we
Wow. It's a
really
lot.
try to help people with everything from how to tape, what kind of, knee pads to wear, to every technique, to how to place gear properly. Our goal is that people leave the clinic feeling competent enough and safe enough that they can go out and really pursue off-width climbing on their own. From
Hmm.
Yosemite to Utah. Um, we also will teach another in the spring. I don't think we've picked our dates yet. It's usually at the end of April,
Gotcha.
usually around April
Hmm.
23rd, 24th, 25th. Um,
Hmm.
so that's we're only doing the 2 a year right now, but we think we might
Okay.
add some more. But it's
God,
three
do
days.
you do private? Do you do privates? Privates.
Yes,
Like if someone
yeah,
was in
and
Moab in June or July, do you do that
yes,
kind of stuff? Okay.
I
All
do.
right.
And so, yeah, people can always contact me, and I can do private courses for people. And Gisele and I can also do private clinics for people. So if anybody
Okay.
has a
Awesome.
group of 4, 3 or 4, we're happy to do. We love teaching, so we're happy to do private clinics as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Ah, well, and as far as Moab's concerned, if for someone, let's just say who's not a climber and who
Yeah.
doesn't climb, if I had one of my good friends. He went. I think 2 years ago. I think he went. Just hiking there, and he went to the canyons and all that stuff. If there's something that you people should go see and really appreciate of Moab, in your opinion,
Yeah.
what is that as a
Well,
family or whatever?
Moab's absolutely spectacular. It's incredible. The climbing there is amazing. The rafting is amazing. The
Hmm.
hiking is absolutely spectacular.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you really just can't go wrong doing anything in Moab. I mean, also there's a really big population of jeepers and all-terrain vehicles of all sorts. Like I said, I have a crazy lifted Tacoma with this huge modified suspension. So yeah, that's also a really big activity in Moab. And again, like you were saying, the petroglyphs are extraordinary. The history of that area is just fascinating. So I can't recommend any one thing, but I can say you should go. You should definitely
Gotcha.
go.
Gotcha.
There's
Yeah.
free
Yeah. Yeah.
guide services. It's just amazing. I went to visit 10 years ago, and 10 years later, I'm living there still. So it happened to
That's
anybody.
all. That oh no, no, that's awesome. And we had just someone just ping us and let us know that they were happy to hear that you also enjoy the gummy bears. I guess they're a
Oh,
gummy
I
bear
love gummy
fanatic
bears. I mean, if it was
when
my
they're on hikes.
choice, if I didn't have a nutritionist watching over me, I'd probably eat 90% gummy bears and like 10% hamburger, maybe. So,
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And
yeah,
where are you climbing? Are you climbing this weekend? Are you guys doing? You said you're
we
working on a
are.
route right now. Are you there?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, obviously
Well,
you're there
right
now.
now I'm in Vitavu, Wyoming, which is one of the best places for climbing the style,
Hmm.
off-foot style. And I'm here with a great group of climbers. For me, Vitavu is vacation because I'm not
Nice.
establishing roots here.
Hmm.
This is my home climbing area. I've climbed almost everything here, so For me, this is just a way to gain some power, to have a good time, and to be on climbing vacation.
Gotcha. We just got another question from Rob, I guess, and he
Yeah.
said, how scared did you get when you climbed Jihad?
Oh, I was scared. I was really
Mm-hmm.
scared. And the reason I was scared, can you hear me okay still?
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
hear you.
The reason I was scared was it had been unrepeated. And
Mm.
the guy who put it up, Bob Scarpelli, is a very famous climber, really tough guy. And nobody had ever gotten on the route. So I was the second person to get on the route in 30 years. So
Hmm.
there's that element of unknown. I mean, now
Yeah.
people are climbing it, but when I got onto it, and I'm so fortunate, it was completely unknown. We didn't know if there was an anchor. We didn't know how we had climbed it. I'd never seen any footage of anybody climb it. I'd never seen a photo of anybody on it. So it was absolutely an unknown, which is one of my favorites. And the rating he had given it, we really just didn't know how hard it would be. Didn't So yeah, it's a brilliant route. I was scared. I got bit by a bat on it, and so I,
Okay.
my
That's a
feelings.
memory.
I ended up having like a huge series of the rabies vaccine
Oh,
afterwards. So for me, that route is unforgettable. It's
oh,
intimidating, but it's a
yeah.
brilliant climb. Like I said, when I did it, there was no anchor on it, so I got to the top and didn't know how I was supposed to get down. So yeah, I was scared.
I see that Rob said he watched the Jihad video about 10 times already.
It's a great climb. I mean, it's just absolutely one of my favorite routes ever. It's a beautiful, beautiful climb.
Oh, that's awesome. Now,
Yeah.
have you ever, you just brought it and just came to my head thinking about it. Have you ever done a first ascent that, that you thought no one has ever done, but then as you climbed up, you realize, oh, there has been someone here?
Yes, that's such a funny question and such a good question, especially in the desert. You'll often be climbing something, or I'm establishing what I think is a first ascent. I'll climb 150 feet and I'll be like, oh my God, there's an anchor. So yeah, there'll be routes that, people forget that there's a long history of climbing in Indian Creek and in the
Mm-hmm.
desert in general. And people didn't report their first ascents.
Mm-hmm.
That was relatively recent. That was more in the
Yeah.
80s that people started reporting their routes,
Mm-hmm.
or putting plaques on them and indicating they had been completed.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are a lot of routes out there that people think are first ascents, and they're not. And that's happened to me.
Yeah.
And I just get there and I'm like, oh.
Oh, but that's fun. I'm sure it's still fun,
It
to like,
is. In
yeah,
fact, in some ways, it's like even more fun because you get to be a part of history. You're like the first
yeah,
person to realize that something was put there. It's like unraveling a big mystery. So yeah, it's fun.
yeah.
And
Have
I
you
try
ever
to.
seen, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, no, go ahead.
No, I said, have you ever, when you have you ever come across, I know you've come around, like you were saying, pottery and stuff, but have you ever come across like some ancient or, old kind of climbing stuff that you saw, maybe someone was using something,
Yes.
and it's like, wow.
Yes, I haven't. It's funny you should say that because that's one of my most favorite things is
Oh,
to be on a route and to discover gear from climbers before me. So to discover like carabiners that were left by the desert
yeah,
pioneers. And often what I will do is I will either take a photo of it, or if it's like a carabiner or webbing, and I can figure out who the first ascensionist was, I will bring them back to the first
that's
ascensionist,
cool.
which is really cool. So I'll try to
That is
do
awesome.
the second ascent of some of their routes, and I'll document the second ascent, and then I'll bring them back their gear that they left when they were 19, and it's just like 30 years.
Oh,
So
I'm
yeah,
sure
it's really fun.
some people there, I mean, I'm sure some people, their mouths must have been dropped that you had this.
They love it. They love it, and it means so much to me too because it makes me feel like I'm part of history. When I
Yeah,
get there and I clip the anchors of these pioneer climbers, it's like time kind of collapses and you're there with them. It's a really
yeah.
powerful and meaningful experience.
No, and that's what I really love about, and we really try to embody here, with Hooked. I really appreciate that part of the outdoors. Now that I'm
Yeah,
doing scuba diving and, looking at, things that, obviously down here in South Florida, there's a lot of artificial wrecks that they put
Yeah.
themselves. But like by up by St. Augustine and stuff like that, there's some real shipwrecks. So it's like, wow, I'm looking at a moment in time
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. And I feel like that.
blowing
It's
my
just
mind.
like, I love that too. It's like a moment in
Yeah,
time. It's like time has stood still briefly. And,
yeah,
that's one of the things I love about establishing roots is that it's like telling a story. And, whoever repeats it in the future gets to read that story and experience
yeah,
it in their own way. And,
yeah.
we all are having this common experience, which is incredible to me also.
Yeah, I mean, you're literally going back in time. It's connecting the web. I
Yeah.
mean, it's wild. Now, when you rate the climbs, are you
Yeah.
like, is your word God? Like when you do the first ascent, you say, this
No,
is really, okay.
no, when I rate climbs, it can be all over the place with ratings. In fact, I stopped rating climbs a few years ago because it's so dependent on your size and so
Got it.
dependent on, so many factors. So climbing ratings are kind of all over the place.
Okay.
Um, there's nothing really consistent. Um, so yeah, climbing ratings are tough, but yeah, for
Got
me,
it.
some routes are much harder than others. Um, so,
But I
but
assume, I mean, you're doing the first ascents. I'm assuming, I mean, I don't know if there's an official record of what the rating
yeah,
is. I mean, I'm guessing you're a part of that. I mean, as far as,
yeah,
hey,
yeah.
what's
I
your,
mean, I will suggest ratings now. Um, but now that I've been climbing a longer time, I tend not to. I describe the route. I want
got it.
people to be safe. So I will
Okay.
say if I see something that's an objective hazard, I don't like to surprise people with a massive loose block. I
Yeah.
do want people to be safe.
Got it.
And I want them to, yeah, I don't want anybody to be, terrified. So
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And this is one of the last questions that someone asked. Um, thoughts of, and I know you started at 15. What's the thoughts of kids starting 10 years old, something like that, like
yeah, it again, this is going to be interesting with the Olympics. I think
hmm
that children starting to climb younger and younger, there will be more tendency towards injuries, just like with gymnasts. Your body hasn't fully developed and you're putting a huge amount of impact on your hands, shoulders. So it will be interesting to see how that develops in the future. But yeah, I think kids should, they should start climbing at like 2. I think, you know, I wish I had started even younger, but who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe I would have lost interest by now.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so,
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well,
but
definitely.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I would love to, have another conversation with you, in the future, maybe after your camp or something.
yeah, I'd love
Um,
that. I'd love to talk
yeah.
to you more. And oh, I see my friend John on there who tells me he said to come to Honduras. I'm sold. I'm ready. That's where I want to be right now.
But have you been to Honduras already? Have
I
you
haven't.
finally?
I want to go
Oh,
so badly. I want to just be on the beach. But also, um, before we end, I just want to also thank my partner Gisele for being an incredible climbing partner. Um, Also, this last spring, my partner Devin and I established 13 new pitches, and many
nice.
routes to the rim. So for whatever we accomplish as climbers, it's always a team. It's not possible without my partners, and so I just
hmm
can't
Is
thank
she
them
the
all.
one? Is she the one Brazilian something that I
Brazilian
see you tag
climber
all the
girl.
time? That's
Yes.
it. Okay.
So you should
Okay.
follow her. She's awesome. She
And
teaches
I've
clinics
seen.
with me.
Got it. And you've tagged him as well. I mean, I've seen the three of you in some photos that you've posted,
Yeah, and Devin has
previous.
done, you know, we've done hundreds of routes together too. So yeah, he's fantastic. Sometimes he teaches with me as well, depending on how busy he is.
That's
But
all.
yeah,
Did you guys all start together? Did you three start together, or did you mentor one or the other, vice versa?
I actually started with different climbers. 10 years ago, I met up
hmm
with Devin a few years ago because I needed a partner for this style, and he's, a brilliant offwidth climber in Indian Creek. So we teamed up, and he's a joy to climb with. He's got tons of energy and passion, and it's quite a desert character. And
That's
then
awesome.
G, I met last summer, and I became a mentor for her. And you know, for she became a mentor for me in many ways.
Hmm.
We've got
Hmm.
a really strong, powerful partnership, and she's become an absolutely fantastic off-width climber. And you know, establishing new routes with another woman is actually really a joy for me. It's very different. Um, and we're extremely supportive of each other. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I've been very
That's
lucky to have incredible climbing partners. And again, just these routes are all spectacular, but they take more than one person. So
yeah. No, no, no. And that's a wonderful. That's just. It's really all inspiring. Not just your photos, I've said, but just the art that the three of you
yeah,
guys are bringing.
yeah.
And so definitely we can plan. After October camp, and we'll definitely share the camp. And please, just let me know,
Thank
and we'll
you.
share it because I
We
know
would love
we've
it.
gotten a few people asking. I'm sure someone might take you up on that private on
That
that
would be
private thing
wonderful.
in the
I love
summer.
teaching, taking people up bigger routes, like 400-foot routes, and, or just teaching them how to climb upside down. A lot of people like just doing that. So,
Yeah,
yeah, teaching
that's
is
awesome.
really a joy. So,
Oh, well,
but it's
listen,
been so
have a
nice
great night.
talking to you.
You too. You too,
Um,
finally.
yeah, I know, finally. Now we have to meet in person.
I personally haven't been to Moab. My dad has actually been to Moab. He went mountain biking there, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago. And I have a buddy who's been there, I think 2 or 3 times. I'm not sure how many times. I think he's been there a couple of times. So I've heard so many amazing things about it. And
It's
it's like an
amazing.
outdoor playground for everybody.
It is the ultimate playground. It's amazing.
Yeah, and just to see it and experience, and honestly, on top of everything, one thing I've been really, it's on my bucket list. I haven't experienced that. Is to go out there and do some kind of overnight camping just to see the
It's
stars with no light
you.
pollution and stuff.
It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. You'll never want to leave.
Yeah, no, no, no. That's and if you're ever down in Florida, let us know. We had no mountains, so
Okay, that's
you know.
okay. I could use a little time on the beach.
Listen, when I've done some diving here and like you see some big rocks or crevices and obviously we're in Florida and like wow, like how cool would this be if there was no water and it was out there and you could climb you know
I would love
you
that.
know no, but that was awesome. But listen, it's been a pleasure. You guys stay safe and
Thank
and
you.
have a great day climbing
Awesome.
tomorrow and we'll speak soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And anybody who wants to contact me about climbing or clinics with any more questions, feel free. And thank you
Awesome.
so much. And we'll chat really soon.
Thanks. All right,
Okay.
chat soon. See you a little later.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.